And most importantly, I was able to figure out the secret handshake to enter this facility today. I saw a tag on a lady coming in the door, and it said that she was vaccinated and huggable. I too am vaccinated and huggable. So if anyone, I'll at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Look, education is hard work. It's crazy hard work. And I don't think that everyone completely realizes the difficulties and the challenges that educators across our state face in every year, much less a year where we're in a global health pandemic, we're in an aggressive hurricane season, we have winter apocalypse in North Louisiana. It's just crazy hard work, but we have so much opportunity in front of us to do this work and to do it better, to provide additional opportunities for kids, to get better outcomes for kids. And so let's do it. Let's do those things. Let's do the hard work that it takes to get better outcomes for kids. And that's not always popular. And so one of the questions I always get is, you know, what is something I can do? I'm a community member. What is something I can do? You can care. That's the first thing you can do. And you can be engaged, because the voices of opposition to progress will always be there, and they'll be loud. But unfortunately, we hear too much silence from those of you in the room who want to make sure that our schools get better. And I know it means so much for you for that to happen. And so I just want to encourage you as much as possible to be engaged with your local systems, to champion the efforts that they need to embark upon to get better outcomes for kids. And so I was asked today to give an update on education through the state of Louisiana. So I have a generic PowerPoint that's available. But before I do that, I want to make a few comments just about our status over the course of the year. Look, I'm extremely proud of the educators, the teachers, the leaders, the parents, most importantly, the kids throughout our great state over the course of the year. You look on TV and you look around the country and you see people trying to figure it out. How do we go to school and keep kids and employees safe? And how do we string together some form of an educational system during that same period of time? And frankly, many places have yet to figure that out. And while our work has not been perfect, I tell you this, I would put the work of the Louisiana educational community up against anything in this country this year for the work that they have done, because our kids are in school, our teachers are working. It may not be perfect, but your kids are getting an education, and for that, I'm very thankful. The Louisiana Department of Education, you may not realize, but we also oversee early child care in the state of Louisiana, and we have over 1,000 early child care centers across the state. We also work with traditional public schools and systems. We work with our public charter partners, as well as our non-public and private schools from throughout the state. As of today, we have around 72% of our kids in the state in daily face-to-face instruction. We have had roughly 2% of our student population over the course of the year that have tested positive for COVID. While one is too many, we think that the efforts that we've put in place over the course of the year in terms of mitigation have worked to keep our kids and our employees safe. Most recently, the United States Department of Education has released guidance on how to reopen a school. The CDC a few weeks ago released guidance on how to reopen a school. And for us, it was quite affirming because it's many of the things that we did and we knew back last summer. And so we have been named by the U.S. Department of Education specifically around our efforts in tutoring and summer program as a national exemplar of how states should address learning loss and how states should consider summer programming. So I'm very thankful for all of that. Another story I want to share is just at the height of the pandemic, there were roughly 27% of early child care centers open from throughout the state. So whenever I say early child care centers or early care centers, many of you may think of daycare facilities. We prefer to use early care, early childhood facilities, and we have over 1,000 across the state. At the height of the pandemic, only 27% of those were open. We have tried our best to funnel resources, including funds, into those centers because we understand that if those centers aren't open, families can't go back to work, this economy can't get moving. So these people too, in our early care facilities, have done heroes work. And as of today, we have 99% of our early care facilities across the state of Louisiana open. And these are center leaders and workers who on any given day work on razor-thin margins and profitability, and it's increasingly difficult during a pandemic. So if you happen to run across an early care worker, be sure and tell them thanks too, in the same way that you tell your teachers and your leaders thanks for the heroes work that they have done over the course of the year. So I will run through just a few slides to give, I think I will.
Is the USB over there plugged in now?
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so one of the most important things that we felt that we had to do is go ahead and list out those things in which we believe. For some time, Louisiana Department of Education has said Louisiana believes, but I don't think that the department has necessarily done a really good job over the past of articulating those things in which they believe. And look, Louisiana is known throughout the nation of a number of different reform efforts to make outcomes better for our kids, specifically over the last 20 years. And so all that our administration is trying to do is to add value to that work, keep that progress going, and continue to move forward with kids. But we wanted to articulate those things in which we think are important. First, children are our highest priority. Families are our partners. Educators are valued professionals. Graduates must be ready. Equity matters. Choice expands opportunities. Schools are invaluable to their communities, and our future is bright. And look, I'm an optimist. I believe that our future is bright. I believe that we can get better outcomes for kids than presently exist today. Just for your information, we have about 800,000 students across our state that are in traditional public charter, or non-public schools. And you know, we do our level best every day to serve all those students while also recognizing the autonomy of the individual systems. We have roughly 50,000 teachers across the state of Louisiana. One of the stats I want to bring to your attention, however, is that within the first 5 years we lose 44% of our teachers. So we lose about half of our teachers within the first 5 years of them being in the profession. They leave the classroom. Within the first 10 years, we lose about 61%. So that tells us that we have work to do, not just on recruitment, but retention across the state. Wouldn't it be nice if we could say, as the state of Louisiana, if you're a new teacher, this is a set of experiences that you could gain as being a new teacher, that we're going to provide you true professional development, that we're going to provide you a true mentor, that we're going to provide a framework of support. And we're not there yet. And we have to work together to get there, because losing half of your workforce every 5 years in education is not a place any of us need to be. So critical goal number one, and we have 6 that I'll go through today. These are the 6 critical goals of the agency. The first is around kids being ready on day one for kindergarten. This means that kids have the basic skills that they need on day one. And you know, for me, this is the greatest educational challenge of our generation. Right now in Louisiana, only 40% of children come to school on the first day of kindergarten with the basic skills that they need to be successful on day one. You think about that, telling your colors green from blue, counting to 10, just knowing how to form a line, knowing your own name, not a nickname. Basic skills. Only 40% of kids across Louisiana come to kindergarten on day one with those necessary skills. And in our most impoverished communities, that number is much greater. For me, this is a place where we have to invest, not just in quantity of early child care seats, but quality seats. We have to make sure that we have quality seats available. You may have seen in the news that the Department of Education in the state of Louisiana has received federal stimulus funding, some of that for K-12, some of that for early care. Our goal with that funding is one, to stabilize give me a sign when my time's up, stabilize the industry as it exists right now, but also think about building a bridge to the future so that more students can eventually be served. So the second goal is students being able to master content by the end of 3rd grade, specifically in math and reading. And right now we know that about 46% of our students have mastered content in English language arts by the end of 3rd grade. A student who has not mastered content or who is not on grade level with their peers by the end of third grade is 2, 3, 4 times more likely to be a high school dropout. Being a high school dropout doesn't start in 11th grade. Being a high school dropout starts way before then. We have to make sure that kids can read, everybody. We need a reading revival in this state, and we need to focus on this work. That is why our agency has recently released a literacy strategic framework. It's going to include work around pre-service teachers before they come into the profession to make sure that they're better prepared. We're working with the higher education individuals on this. It also has to include improving that core content instruction during that reading time. It has to include knowing what are the individual deficits that a child might have. Is it phonics? Is it fluency? Is it something else? And then knowing how to intervene. We have to give kids access to books, make sure that we have books in their hands, whether those are traditional books or ebooks. And we have to make this important. We also have to make sure in our lower grades that we have an accountability system in place so that we're measuring the progress of our schools and our teachers so that we can fairly report out to the public the status of their public and schools during that time period. You look at our math numbers, only 43% of students are mastering math by the end of third grade. Now, once we get to 8th grade, this is critical goal number 3, you see that those English language arts reading numbers remain consistent with the third grade number, but you see an incredible drop in math. So third grade students on the far right, you see that 43% of third grade students have mastered math content by the end of third grade, but by the end of 8th grade, that number has dropped to 28%. There is something systemically wrong that is happening when you're talking about a measurement of hundreds of thousands of students across the state of Louisiana. And we have to figure that out. Anecdotally, I have ideas around what that's about, but we have to invest in determining what is the cause of that and then intervening to make sure that that is improved. The next 3 goals that we'll share are around the high school experience. I want to claim here the state of Louisiana has done an outstanding job, specifically over the last decade, through the work of the state board, the administration at the department, but also schools throughout the state of Louisiana in increasing graduation rates. Those graduation rates over the last 10 years have increased by roughly 10 points. So when you see an 80% graduation rate, that means that if students begin their high school experience as a 9th grader, 4 years later, they're graduating on time with a high school diploma. The next critical goal has to do with students earning college and/or career credentials. Now, for me, this is a place that I'm especially passionate. I think that we have to further personalize the high school experience for our students. I think we have to recognize that the entry point for work has shifted. Students, when they graduate high school, overwhelmingly are not going to simply be able to have a high school degree and have a successful entry point into work. It's going to take a credential. It's going to take an apprenticeship. It's going to take an associate's degree, 4-year degree, or something beyond that. But we have to come together to appreciate the fact that a high school diploma is no longer going to satisfy the entry point of work for our students. And so our high schools then can't operate in the way that they have always operated. We have to be more deliberate in personalizing the experience so that students have an individualized approach to their high school years, and that there's a deliberate handoff between that high school experience and what is next in that student's life. So this is an area where we have to do better of making sure that our students are graduating with credentials. Maybe those are workforce credentials, maybe those are college credits. You see that this is a number I want to call out specifically here in Baton Rouge. This is a statewide number. So in the top left, the circle, it shares that a couple of years ago, we had over 42,000 high school graduates, 42,000 across the state, but we only had 159 of those graduates dually graduate with a high school degree and an associate's degree, and that first 2 years of that college experience or the standalone associate's degree in a career and technical education craft. I think that we should be a state that says that we believe that junior and senior year of experience should be more deliberate in preparation for what's next in the season of the student's life. We also know that we only had about 700 students out of 42,000 graduate with community service endorsements of giving back, of serving their community. and we want to increase that. Finally, critical goal number 6 has to do with TOPS awards. You know, this is an award given every year to students who have a certain GPA, have a certain ACT score, and we need to make sure that more of our students are graduating eligible for TOPS. But I want to talk about these 3 together and talk about an initiative that we have pushed forward this year, and we look to have our first set of early adopters for next year, and we're calling it our Fast Forward initiative. And we're calling it Fast Forward because we're really thinking about that 11th and 12th grade year. Right now across the state of Louisiana, only about 40% of students have a full year as a senior. So about 40% of students take a full course load as a senior. And so we see some opportunities there because it's a fully funded year to be able to do some additional things. So our Fast Forward initiative has 3 buckets. The first is around apprenticeships. So if you're an organization that has apprenticeships such as carpentry or HVAC or automotive, and you want to take students in during that junior and senior year and say, you know what, junior and senior year, they're going to be with us, they're going to be experiencing an apprenticeship that is recognized, then what we're going to do is take the work that can happen during that apprenticeship and sub that out in lieu of what would traditionally happen during that junior and senior year of high school for families and kids who want to pursue that. And so under that opportunity, we break down barriers and we create opportunities so that students, while they're being publicly funded for their education, they can come out of high school with a full apprenticeship and go to work should they choose to want to do that. Now, the second bucket is around the community college system and specifically around career and technical education at the community college system. So associate's degrees that are basically terminal degrees in career and technical education crafts. Look, we have diminished the role for too long of craft jobs, of vocational jobs, and we've got to elevate that work. We've got to help people understand just how important that particular work is. And so the second bucket allows for students to participate during their junior and senior year at a 2-year community college, or it can be a satellite opportunity at their high school. So again, you're breaking down the barriers of that junior and senior year, the things they would traditionally have to take in terms of courses, and you're substituting in that associate's degree for students and families who want to do that. They graduate then both with a high school degree and an associate's degree. The third bucket has to deal with students who are interested in a 4-year degree or beyond. This is where dual enrollment and advanced placement courses come into play. So what we would do under these opportunities is we would have our systems around the state partner with 4-year universities and beyond, build a framework for what junior and senior year could look like so that students could go ahead and get some of that coursework under their belt while they're still funded, state funded, as a high school student. With that, what's happening is we are deliberately connecting our students with institutions of higher education in the state of Louisiana, which means they're more likely to be retained after their first year. They're less likely to enter college and then drop out because they've had a deliberate experience, a handoff, beginning during their high school years. So we have asked systems from throughout the state to begin planning around these 3 things. They are planning with organizations that do apprenticeship work right now. They're planning with community colleges right now. They're planning with 4-year universities. And this month, we expect to receive our first set of our Fast Forward pathways, which are alternative degree pathways for students in high school. And we intend to take those to our state board for approval, have our first set of early adopters next year. It's about being more efficient with our dollars that we have and serving our students in a better way. But it's also our contribution to the students so that they can be successful in life. It's our contribution to the economy so that we're actually preparing a workforce that makes sense, because all of these options are going to be built around the regional workforce needs in local communities. So that might look different in Houma than that might look in Shreveport. And those pathways would look different, but that's where those students are from. That's where they live. That's where they're most likely going to spend their lives. So we want to encourage opportunities for students to develop around those particular areas. So I have a whole host of slides that could follow, but I think we mentioned stopping and maybe taking a couple of questions. So we have time for a couple of questions. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Please repeat the question.
Yeah, so her question was, how did I get so good looking? And I will tell you. No, so she asked what happens to math results between 3rd and 8th grade. I can only share with you anecdotally what I believe happens during this period of time. And I think it has to do with content knowledge. Math gets increasingly complex as students matriculate through the grade levels. And as teacher preparation programs prepare teachers for elementary education, there's not much differentiation between that. And so we just have to make sure that, and that's okay, we just have to make sure that we're stepping in with professional development, either from the state level or from the system level, to make sure that we're helping teachers better understand that content. I think also another piece has to do with, over 70% of our students are economically disadvantaged. They're economically challenged. Many of our students don't have mentors at their home. So I think another part of it has to do with making sure that we're connecting kids during this really vulnerable period in their life, emotionally, socially, psychologically, being more deliberate in making sure they have a connection to a mentor during this particular time to help them see the value of their education. But again, that's anecdotally, we need to study that, but we have to solve it. Yes, ma'am.
So
Hey, Beth.
there's a bill in this session that requires mandatory kindergarten.
Mhm.
Favor of that.
Yeah, so there is a bill in this session that requires mandatory kindergarten. First of all, the Department of Education, we do not take formal positions on bills. Our State Board of Education has taken the position to support that particular bill. For me personally, I believe that anything that we can do to illuminate the need for early childhood education is important. If families would prefer to homeschool, for instance, that remains an option for families to be able to do that.
Were you surprised? Many of us thought it already was.
It's the greatest secret in Louisiana that kindergarten is not already mandatory. Yes.
When that actually ties into my question, if you think about, you talk about early child care,
Mhm.
right? So what you're saying is that's really from birth to 5-year-olds kindergarten versus moving them into school.
Mhm.
So I guess that is a secret. I really thought kindergarten was required, and making that shift as a state, I think would give that extra boost. I mean, there's certainly data on that. Would you say, are they looking at that in the legislature?
Yeah, and I don't know that there are. We don't have a number of students that this would be impacting. Like, we don't know how many students aren't coming to kindergarten because we don't track something before we know the kids exist. But we believe that number to be somewhere around 2,000 kids across the state of Louisiana that probably are not in a kindergarten program that could be. Yes, ma'am.
I was at the Department of Education for the PCAR years, and there was a real emphasis on early literacy and pre-K. And the feds also were making a major investment in early literacy programs that were based on rigorous research, which translated meant a phonics approach. And I think my own opinion is that the speed bump in that, because then we stopped doing that. So there was a speed bump there, though, where teachers, where the rubber meets the road, had not learned phonetically, nor did they really understand all the decoding processes. So in your early literacy initiative, which I was thrilled to see that you have one, will the instruction be based again on these peer-reviewed journals and all that research about how to teach reading to the youngest children?
Yeah. So our question is around literacy in the early grades and the best way to do that. My question to you would be, are you looking for a job? Someone wants to, her husband wants to send her to work. No, you're exactly right. I think we have to follow the science of reading. Now, whenever we talk about the science of reading, whenever our administration talks about the science of reading, we're talking about phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, comprehension, vocabulary. So there are, for those of you in the room who aren't her, there are multiple approaches believed to teach kids how to read. The first is phonics. So you're breaking down the words and you're sounding those things out. And the other approach is whole language, where you teach kids that's the word and you just call out the word. So you're just looking at it and you're calling it out. And then somewhere in between is what's called balanced literacy, which kind of blends those things together, which I call confusion. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're doing what she just said we need to do. We need to make sure that in our pre-service programs in our college and universities that before a teacher certifies, that their training has been the science of reading. It has been specifically these things that we know, such as phonics, that are helpful for kids to help them better understand to read. We also have to make sure that we're training teachers in the state now who have not had that training, making that available to them so that they too can teach kids how to read. So yes, we believe in what you're saying. Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate your call. I really appreciate your call for individualized attention and support. And with that in mind, what is the ratio of personnel like counselors or social workers to students in both elementary and high school settings?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a broader question, I think, than just a number. So if you have a conversation with school counselors, one of the first things you'll hear is, we'd like to do more counseling. The second thing that you'll hear is, of the students that we work with that are frequent flyers in terms of behavior problems, most of those children have experienced some traumatic event in their life or multiple traumatic events in their lives. So this whole conversation around student well-being and mental health is important. And I think the pandemic has exacerbated the need for us to be having these conversations to make sure that we are ensuring that kids are ready to access to learning, both physically, psychologically as well. So look, the school systems are never going to be able to afford enough social workers and counselors to do the things that they have to do and need to do to support kids. Where I think there is an opportunity, however, is in breaking down the barriers and partnering with external agencies who are mental health agencies, social work agencies that could then partner with the schools, potentially office in those school buildings, and then they have the opportunity to maybe bill Medicaid. 73% of our kids are economically disadvantaged, so they can bill Medicaid or private insurance. But there is an opportunity there, I believe, to not just look at, can we get enough counselors, but I think we have to look at, can we break down barriers to make sure that every kid is serviced, not just with the employees that we have, but with a broader approach. Yes, ma'am.
This is more of a global question for you. I like your 6 goals. Okay, I'm a native Louisianan. I've lived here all my life. We've always been underperforming in education. Let me say that again. We've always been underperforming in education. If you apply what you're doing here, is that really a game changer? Or is there any one thing up here that really is going to be a game changer?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's a panacea. I mean, I don't think there's like this one magic bullet that solves it. I think that we are going to be challenged. If you look at our poverty rates compared to other states, we are going to be challenged, but we have to do the things that we know matter. You know, we believe that literacy matters. We know this high school experience matters. If we can lift people out of poverty, then they're going to be better, and their kids then, who are then going to be the next wave of students, are going to be better. You know, one of the things that comes to my mind is right now we rank our schools across the state of Louisiana, A, B, C, D, and F, and we have 122,594 students, 122,594 in D and F schools. That's not acceptable. So we have to work to transform those schools, and we are working with our resources to try and do that. But at the same time, I think we have to make sure those kids have choice. Those families have choice. If those families want to move and go to a different school setting, which is a higher performing school, I think we need to make sure that we have that available, which comes to the larger picture of what we shared earlier is, you know, we believe that choice is important. You know, we believe that parents deserve choice around where their kids go to school, whether that's traditional public, a public charter option, or a non-public option. So we're not going to solve this year or next, but we're going to do our part to add value to it. And if you have a suggestion, be happy to hear it later when you come hug me, because I'm vaccinated. Yes, sir.
Do you know what sort of impact the pandemic has had on your teacher workforce yet? You know, there's already a pay gap. We already see that grades are underperforming. That teacher setting, that classroom setting, seems like it's more difficult to come back to.
Yeah.
Do you know any sort of initial numbers on what that looks like?
No, I mean, what we do know is that we did have more retirements this summer than in a traditional year. I mean, I understand that. I get that. You know, our teachers have been great this year. They've really risen to the occasion. They've put themselves, in my opinion, in a really good posture for being able to ask for increases in their pay, especially when you look around the country at what's happening in other places. Our shortage areas in education aren't like across the board shortages. You hear a lot about that. Our shortage areas are really in places like high school math, high school science, special education, English language learners. Those areas were a problem before the pandemic. We're assuming they're going to be an issue after, and it's a place that we have to explore and certainly get better. Yes, sir.
So just, Cade, I'm Christian with the YMCA, and I've exchanged a few phone calls and stuff. One of the things that I'd like to highlight for you guys is I think it'd be important for you guys to make sure, or ensure that you guys are partnering with the social service agencies throughout the state as well. And I think about just here at EBR, I think between myself, probably Brett, and Boys and Girls Club, we will probably have 3,000 to 5,000 of those kids in our programs over the summer. So if there was a relationship there, we could help with that educational process throughout the summer, but there tends to be a disconnect sometimes with the expectation from us to support it all. So I think that could get a lot better over time.
Yeah, and the work that you do is really important to me. The Y, the Boys and Girls Club, local faith-based organizations that do this same work. I think that if we can, I may have already said this, but we have kids about 40 hours a week. They're in the community about 128 hours a week. So no, I didn't just say that here. I said that at the Capitol a few minutes ago. We have kids about 40 hours a week. They're in the community, whether asleep or awake, for 128 hours a week. If that 128 overwhelms the 40 is minimized. The good of the 40 is minimized. And so that's why we have to have after-school partners like Boys and Girls Club, like the Y, like local organizations. And so whenever I visit with groups like this, one of the things I like to say is consider investment in these type of organizations, these organizations that work with kids from 3 to 7 or 3 to 8 or 4 to 7 or whatever that number is. What we want to do moving forward is to help support you, but we also want to think about three things. One is, how can students get core content tutoring during that time? How can students get access to electives such as music, art, PE during those times? And then how can we really connect kids with a mentor during that period of time? And we think if you can do those three things during the afternoon and evening periods, we have a lot of chances. We have more of a greater chance that kids will be successful. So we have one last question. Yes, ma'am. You're up. Yes, Ms. Gwen.
And thank you, Superintendent, for your leadership on early childhood, high quality early childhood. But you've mentioned at least 3 times choice. How do you define choice? What does that mean?
I believe that we should have options for families to make a decision about what type of school and where they would like their child to attend. And so maybe that is their local neighborhood public school. Maybe it is, and I think that our neighborhood schools play an important role in our communities. I went to a neighborhood school, but I think it could mean something different as well. It could mean that within that district itself, that you could have choice options. So in a previous life as a superintendent, one of the things that I did is I created the option for every high school student in our system in Jefferson, 51,000 kids, their 9th grade year, to choose the high school of their choice across lines. And so that's an example of how that can be done within the system. But I also think about our charter partners and high quality charters. And so I don't think that a charter in and of itself is the solution to education as a whole. I think it boils down to, is it a great school? But I think it's a part of the plan to make it better. And another piece of choice I think is important is the non-public schools. We have a scholarship program in our state where we can take the funding that would ordinarily go with the child, and we can have it go to a qualified non-public school. In a recent Supreme Court ruling has said that can happen across America. So I think that's another important point of choice. Look, I'm everybody's superintendent in every school, and I want great schools.